Focus on the act of blooming. You know, there's a saying out there whose author is anonymous, and it says, "A flower does not compete with the other flowers around it, it just blooms." And although healthy competition is normal and a part of life and necessary, it motivates us to strive for success in games, in sports, in academics, or in the workplace. Healthy competition is absolutely necessary. And one form of healthy competition is in teamwork. For instance, in sports, when both teams come to play, they recognize that they have put in the work, they've done what they needed to prepare, and they've come to win. Not just to play, but they've come to win. And recognizing that somebody's going to win, but somebody's going to lose. And that it is not a reflection on their commitment or their talent or the time they put in to prepare. It's just the reality of the game. And they oftentimes will shake their competitors' hands, whether they've won or lost. And when they've lost, they're for sure disappointed. But they recognize that their competitors worked just as hard and came prepared just as much to the game. And it is not a negative reflection on whether or not you've won or lost, on your commitment to play and win the game. And part of that is because there's a healthy respect for their competitors. They recognize that their competitors work just as hard, prepared just as hard. And whether their competitors won or lost, they respect that they came to play. And one of the things we need to do is take personal accountability. Own and think about the things that we do well and the things that we don't, the areas that need improvement, that we recognize them and commit to putting in the time to make it better. And in doing so, our competitors can often be motivated themselves by watching how we have carried ourselves, how we have competed. And it can oftentimes cause them to rethink their strategy. And we can do that without demeaning their efforts. In other words, we don't have to put them down to feel good about ourselves. Now, the flip side of that is negative competition. And one form of negative competition is when we are constantly comparing ourselves to others. When we constantly compare ourselves to others, we're not seeing things clearly, because there's no way that we can compare ourselves to others without feeling bad about ourselves or without having this inflated self-image. Because when we compare ourselves to someone else, then we're using that as a guidepost. And oftentimes what will happen is that it will breed a jealousy, or it will breed a arrogance or a cockiness. Another form is when we compete for approval. When we compete for the approval of others, we're never gonna be successful, because whether or not they're praising us, which, by the way, not all praises that we receive are true and accurate, or whether they're criticizing us. And likewise, we're not as bad as the criticism. But when we seek approval of others, and that is why we're competing, they're never going to give us exactly what we need. Never what we need when we compete against ourselves. One problem is that it can push us when we are competing negatively to take on more roles, to overextend ourselves. And in doing so, we fall short of reaching many of our goals, which then leads to failure in whatever it is that we're trying to succeed in. And it can have a negative effect on our self image, our self esteem, and it can cause us to be unfairly critical of other people. In other words, I failed because they cheated, or I failed because they didn't do something right, or I failed because the game wasn't level. I failed because of something that somebody else did, instead of recognizing that your failure is yours. You own it. If you failed, it's because of something that you didn't do that you needed to have, or that you did that you shouldn't have. And when we take a step back and look at ourselves truly and honestly, then we can see those areas that need improvement. And we can commit to improving in those areas. Because negative competition is a zero-sum game. And a lot of us grew up thinking that if we won, we were good, and if we lost, we were bad. And that is so far from the truth. But life is not a competition. And in life, we need to redefine our definition of success, what it means to each of us individually, because we're all uniquely made. And my definition of success and my measure of success is very different from yours. Examine and re-examine what your definition is of success. And then analyze the causes of your competitiveness. How far does the roots go back? Were you always competitive just naturally? Some people are. Are you competitive because of something somebody did or said when you were younger or in years past that has driven you to this negative competitiveness? And then you need to focus on self-improvement. Focus on competing against yourself. Focus on being better today than you were yesterday. And focus on being better tomorrow than you were today. Remember, a flower just blooms. Think about it.